Okay, Incredible Feats. This is a Dan Cummins podcast. He has several. He's got Time Suck. He's got Scared to Death. He's got this. Incredible Feats is just a daily little, 5 to 8 minute podcast, and each one it tells you about some incredible feat. So look, they've broken records, made history, and turned the impossible into the incredible. Every weekday, join comedian and host Dan Cummins as he profiles amazing achievements made by people from all over the world. Um, it's really good, and it's cool. It's like a little bit of motivation each day, hearing about someone who overcame insurmountable odds. So, and that's just something that I've always loved to hear about. So, if you're like me and you like to hear about that sort of thing, go check that out. Okay, Jocko Podcast. If you don't know who Jocko is, Jocko Willink, he's a retired Navy SEAL, and he has a company called Echelon Front, where he goes around and basically teaches the business world, um, you know, how to operate their business almost like a Navy SEAL runs a SEAL team. And it's pretty awesome. A lot of the guests that he has on the show are veterans of, he goes way back. He's had like World War II veterans on there, Vietnam veterans, and they'll just tell, 2 or 3 hours he'll spend with them talking about the stuff that they did, the stuff that they went through, what their life was like, all the way from their childhood. And it's just really interesting to me. I love military history, and I especially love hearing personal stories and stories of overcoming odds. So Jocko Podcast is so fantastic. It's also a big hit of motivation. This guy is such a motivating person to listen to. If you've never listened to Jocko, go check out Jocko Podcast. Or check him out on the Joe Rogan podcast, because that'll give you an idea of who he is. And then you'll probably want to check out his podcast. Okay, Lone Rat and Cubs. This is my friend Ryan Fraseri, who does the Talkin' Snick podcast, which we'll talk about in a little bit. He also has a TMNT podcast. So this is something that he created. He's only got 3 episodes out so far. And I don't know if there are plans to continue this going forward, but if he does, I'd like to see it, because it's a cool idea. He actually hosts this show with his 2 sons, who, have taken in all of this Ninja Turtle media with him, and they just discuss their favorites of the entire franchise. So that's really cool. If you're into the TMNT, anything from the 80s cartoon to the 90s films, to the current day iterations, go check out Lone Rat and Cubs. Next up, Long Lost Brothers. This is my podcast. Me and my friend Jesse Cole. This is just a bullshit hangout podcast, really. We talk about everything from fitness, nutrition, and mental toughness to addiction, recovery, and current events. We're all over the place and wouldn't have it any other way. And that basically describes our podcast in a nutshell. It's kind of evolved. It started off mostly fitness and kind of motivational stuff and tips and tricks to dominate life, but it really became more of a pop culture, just 2 friends hanging out podcast. So if that's something you want to check out, you definitely should. It's like being a fly on the wall and listening to 2 guys hang out for an hour. So go check that out if you're interested. Long Lost Brothers with Brett Scott and Jesse Cole. Next up, another one of my podcasts, Marvel Plus. This is something I'm really proud of. I've put a lot of work into this podcast. Each week I break down and discuss the newest Disney Plus Marvel series, episode by episode, and I bring on a new guest every week to do it. So it's a lot of fun, man. And I bring on different people from all different walks of life, other podcasters, people who are just fans of the franchise. But it's such a good time, man. And I'm getting really excited for this Loki series coming up. We'll be breaking down every one of those episodes. Then the What If series, which comes out pretty soon this summer. But yeah, I'm having a blast doing this. A lot of people have been really receptive. They're really enjoying it. It's probably my most popular of all my podcasts. But if you're interested in the MCU, in Marvel Comics, in the Disney Plus series, please go check that out. It's something I'm really proud of and I'm really trying to grow. Next up, another Marvel podcast. Now this, it's brand new, so I'm still getting a feel for it. I don't know if I love it, but I love the idea of it. Now, this is Method Man. If you don't know who Method Man is, he's a hip-hop artist, and he is a big comic book geek as well. And he hosts a show where he brings on celebrities who are big fans of the comic book media as well. And he brings them on to talk about their favorite comic books and, how they influence their work currently. It's just really cool. So you can see he's had Killer Mike, Jamil Hill, Kevin Smith's been on there, Michelle Rodriguez. It's fantastic. What I've heard so far. Like I said, I haven't listened to every episode, but the ones I have listened to, I've really enjoyed. So if you're interested in that, go check that out. Marvel Method with Method Man. Then we've got Mind Pump. This is just a fitness podcast. These guys are 4 personal trainers who basically take everything that they know about fitness and they just talk about it every week in the latest news and fitness, and they break down what they think of stuff. And it's another one of those no bullshit podcast. That's what I like about it. Now they do a lot of selling because they're, overall they're there to sell their product, their programs, but they do it with a lot of honesty. I feel like all the stuff that they talk about, I feel like they're being honest about it. They break down what supplements work, what don't, what workouts are best, which ones are, and from all different perspectives too when they bring on guests. But it's another one of those that they're not into the latest trend, the latest fitness or nutrition trend. They talk about fitness in a general sense, and they give you information that regular ass people can use. All right, Monday Morning Podcast. This is probably one of my favorite solo podcasts, especially for comedy. I feel like Bill Burr is probably one of, if not the funniest, one of the funniest comedians out there doing it right now. Also a very talented actor. But I just love that he has enough thought in his head to put out these twice a week podcasts. And he's been doing it since I think 2010. It's crazy that he's been doing this for this long. But he just sits there by himself and spills his thoughts, and it's absolutely hilarious. So as you can see, Bill Burr rants about relationship advice, sports, and the Illuminati. That's putting it really generally, but he talks about everything. And like I said, he's one of the funniest men on the planet. So if you're not listening to Bill Burr's Monday Morning Podcast, he puts one out every Monday and Thursday. Go check that out. It's really funny. Next up, Our Fake History. This is my second favorite history podcast, a podcast about myths we think are history and history that might be hidden in myths. Awesome stories that really maybe happened. So this is all based on, he'll take a history myth or like a legend, right? And then he'll break down if it's actually true, if it could be true. And he really goes in deep on these things. Some of them, like I said, there's several parts to some of them. It's like part 1, part 2. There's been like 4-parters. But he goes pretty deep too. Not Dan Carlin deep, but he really does his homework. And it's a fantastic podcast, especially if you're into historical myths, being, like Mythbusters type shit. Really good podcast. Next up, Scared to Death. This is Dan Cummins' podcast that he does with his wife. And they just tell each other scary stories for an hour. And that's it. That's it. And I listen to this with my son. We really enjoy this. We listen to it. We have a long car ride every week together. And this is what we do. We like to listen to Scared to Death. We like to listen to Dan and Lindsay tell each other scary stories. You can definitely, I feel like you can listen to it with your kids. Maybe not like tiny kids, but like I'd say 10 or older, definitely okay. My sons are 10 years old, and I have no problem with them listening to it. So it's a lot of fun. It's campfire stories, and it's a good time. Talking Snicked, the Wolverine show. Now, Ryan, I've done podcasts with him before, and like I just talked about his Lone Rat and Cubs podcast a minute ago, but Ryan has a Wolverine comics breakdown show, and I listen to this every week. I've listened to every episode. I started listening in 2018, caught up at the time, and have been listening every week since. He took a little break last year, but now he's back strong, putting out weekly episodes, and now even doing additional episodes where he breaks down episodes of X-Men the Animated Series as well. But yeah, this is one of my favorite comics podcasts of all time because Ryan really has a love for the character of Wolverine, and it really comes through in the content how much he cares about this character, and that's my favorite comic book character as well. So obviously that's going to draw me to it. But on top of that, it's just his passion for the character that I really enjoy. That's why I listen to his over other podcasts, maybe about that character. So yeah, go check that out. If you're a Wolverine fan, definitely check out Talkin' Snicked. Tell him Steve Dave. This is Walt Flanagan, Brian Johnson, and Brian Quinn. Now, Walt Flanagan and Brian Johnson were the two of the guys from Comic Book Men, that show on AMC. It was basically like a Pawn Stars type show, but in a comic shop, and all comic book based, nerd based stuff. And then Brian Quinn is from Impractical Jokers. And if you haven't seen Impractical Jokers, I don't know what rock you've been living under, but these three guys have had a podcast since I think like maybe 2012-ish, something like that, 2010, somewhere around in there. But it's a fantastic podcast. Yeah, it's definitely adult themed. You don't want to let your kids listen to it. It gets pretty raunchy at times, but it's one of my favorite things to listen to. And this is just three guys sitting around bullshitting. A lot of times it comes out really funny, but it's just fun to hear the guys talk and tell stories. Next up, we got